Well, it's Tuesday and beautiful day. Probably get some riding in later. And Matthew and I have been hanging out in the shop. He's been watching my bike for me, guarding it. I wanted to answer some comments that people have been leaving me. Let's see, Bob was asking me about the windshield. Antonio was asking me about injectors. And Matthew is a young fella buying a bike, his first bike, so I'd like to talk on those three subjects. The injectors, he said about, is there any video on replacing them? And I looked on YouTube and stuff, and I see a lot about cleaning them. There was one guy with a BMW that explains where they're at, but like for your particular bike, the only thing I can say is, you know, the climber manual will probably show it, to show where they're at and everything. And I said about a lot of people put YouTube stuff on. That's why I did the one on the C50 Boulevard doing the tappets step by step. Yeah, a lot of them showed about adjusting them, but nobody showed what do you take off here. And this bike, I've never worked on one of these, and it was like, what all do I have to go through? I could see I had to take the tank off, but you got to take both seats, the tank, and then I show how that one part from your air filter that goes up to the carb, you can pull it out, take the bands off that clamp it so you don't bend them, take them off, then you can just pull it out. It's just rubber, it'll flex. Get it out of there so you can work in there. But nobody showed that, so I thought when I do mine, I was going to show it. So I showed it step by step. Because like I said, I think the bike shop wanted $320 for that to set those. Well, man, if you can save that kind of money, and you know, I show it and I say, only if you feel comfortable doing it. And a lot of guys that put videos on should think, you know, there's new guys there that don't understand a lot of this stuff. You've never done it. As long as I've been working on bikes, I hadn't done it on this bike. I mean, the Hondas were usually right there, easy to get at, the ones I worked on. So it would have been nice if somebody would have showed all that, so I said I'm going to do it. So any of my videos that I put up, I try to show it and really explain it. And then Bob asked me about a windshield he was going to get for his bike. How do you judge it? Okay, so on the motorcycle, the windshield, if you set on the bike and you get like your wife to put a level here at your nose and out, that should be about the top of the windshield. So when I did my windshield on the Suzuki Boulevard, I'm 5'3", so I'm short. The windshield you get with it's really tall. So we put a line on it, but I made sure the adjustment on the shield was clear down. So when I did it, if it was a little shorter than I wanted, I could raise it back up some. I could always take a little more off the top if I had to, and they show on there, so I won't talk too much about it, about cutting these. You can cut these shields and then sand them real fine, and you can't even tell it was done. And when you do that on the bike, let me get on my bike so I can show. Now, I got to unlock it. Got it locked, even though Matthew's there, you know, watching. He's on night duty. Okay, there. So now I'm sitting there, and like I said, now when I do this, you need two people because I can't see the level, but it should be level about right there. So what I'm doing is I'm looking over the top of it when I'm driving. Now this is like, you know, I can look through here to see the road, but most riding, I'm looking over top of it. And what they do is they'll show on there, if you look it up about trimming your windshield or, you know, cutting it down, they put a lot of tape on it and they use a jigsaw. Well, I had a Harbor Freight, one of those little circular saws with the two blades that go opposite directions. And that cut it real nice. It didn't jump or bind. So you could probably use anything like that, whatever, you know, you feel comfortable with. And it's kind of intimidating because the shield costs a lot of money for these, unless you find a used one. And it's just, it's intimidating, but you can do it. And how I learned this is I have that Harley and JP Cycles out of, I think they're in Iowa. But you look up JC, no wait, JP, JC, I'm trying to think. JP, I'm thinking of a hobby shop. jpcycles.com. And you can order, log on there, fill out your name and address. They'll send you a free catalog. And you want the big one. It's a big catalog. They send it free. And I know they used to. I haven't got a catalog recently because I usually just go to their site. But in the catalog, there was like every so many pages, they would have a little rectangular draw, like, you know, drawn there, and they would give you hints. And it showed about where this windshield should be. And it's right, you know, it's what worked for me. So their stuff has to be right. And they give hints and stuff on bikes, and a lot of it, man, I wrote down, and I have, you know, because it's really interesting stuff. And let's see what else. Okay. Bob said about he was looking at a windshield, one that he wanted from a manufacturer. He didn't know if it was going to be cut out enough for the headlight on his bike. Well, usually the windshield manufacturers have them for all bikes, especially the newer bikes. They want to have them, you know, because each one, it might be a universal one where it isn't cut out as much. You could make it a little bigger, you know, by doing it with the saw and then sanding it real good. Use different grits. You start out with the medium one, like wet and dry, and keep it wet. Then you work down and down until you get down to real fine stuff where you can dress it and sand it so it looks good. Then on my nephew's V-Rod, the V-Rod. Now that bike came without a windshield. The mirrors I had talked about being so shitty, he got better mirrors. They're just bigger and you can see behind you. They did that to keep that bike sleek. That's why they had the little wee foot pegs, little round ones, hard on your feet. They wanted to keep that slim. That bike was made like that. Well, when he bought it, the previous owner put a little shield. It was the shield Harley had for that bike. You could buy extra to put on. And it is small. But you can, like I'm on the bike, you can tilt it this way. When you look at it, it isn't like the Suzuki where you can see slots where you can move it up and down and stuff. This has two arms come out and they're bent, just like I have my arm bent here. And what it is, they're like this, and they go on the windshield, and the windshield has things on it that swivel. Well, then you turn these up and down like this, those arms, and it brings it, the front, top, back, and forward. The bottom is on a hinge. It doesn't go back and forth. But when you tip that, and it's clear down here on his bike, when you tip that back and forward, it adjusts the air going up over your head. And I told Bob, I said, what you do is you put it on, you go out for a ride, and then take your hand up here by your head, move it up and down, and you'll feel right where the air's going. If it's hitting right here on your helmet or lower, you want to adjust it. You would adjust it outward like that. The top would go outward. What it does is shoots the air higher. You don't want it shooting real high. You want it just up over your head, and that will take that air up over there, and you won't get that buffeting. When I rode the V-Rod home for him, I even say on there about adjusting that shield because my head was constantly buffing and the airline was clear down here on me. I took my hand, and on the video you can see I'm feeling for it, and it was about right here. So all of this up here is getting hit with air. So we adjusted it for him. Adjusted it out, he took it out, maybe a little more. We just kept doing it until it went right over his head, and I told him, put your hand up there, you'll feel it. And he did, and he was getting it over his head, so now he don't have the buffeting. So that's a way to set that. Then Matthew is buying his first bike and this and that, and I had some suggestions for him. Is he's buying a used bike. With a used bike, you never know how it's been treated. Now this bike I knew because I knew the man that owned it. But if you buy one who are you buying it from? If you're buying it from an older person like me, you know the bike probably hasn't been beaten a lot, because I cruise, most of us do. The younger the person you're buying it from is usually, they're a little harder on it. It's just, you know, the norm of the thing. And, you know, you take a chance because you're buying it as is. But what I do is, like when my nephew bought his V-Star, then he bought the V-Rod, I said, we're taking it from scratch. Change all the brake fluids in it. Clean the brake pads, check them. The oil. Another thing, when you go to look at it, he's buying, I believe, the Volusia, that's the older model than his Boulevard. So he probably has a sight glass for his oil. You have to stand these up to see it. Look, if it's perfectly clear, the guy changed the oil. Now, you don't know if he changed it because he wants it to look good, or he did just happen to change it. But if it's dark, you could, there's not a dipstick with this. I like when there's a dipstick because you can pull the oil out and smell it. But you could take the opening where you put the oil in on the side of this bike, open it and smell it. If it smells real burnt, it's kind of, you know, you got to watch. It should smell kind of like used oil. It's hard to describe how it smells, but it shouldn't have a burnt smell to it. And a few other things is, you want to do all this stuff, you know, I mean, go all over it. Even if the oil is clean and you take it home, you know, you get the bike home, it's yours. Change oil. It ain't, you know, I mean, it ain't going to cost you a fortune. Okay, you might want to take the seats off. I don't know the Volusia, how close it is to this. It's probably the same. You should take the tank off, set the valves. Then, everything like that you can do on that bike. Get a new air filter. Of course, you'll change your oil filter. You're starting from scratch. And what I suggest, and I do for my Harley, I have 2 books on it. This is a Suzuki. You get yourself a notebook, and I painted the front blue so I know it's for the Suzuki just by glancing at it. Now, all my information's on here. Front tire, rear tire, the PSI. I don't have to go in the book and look every time I do it, because you're going to forget. And then the oil drain plug, how to tighten it. The valve clearance, I wrote those on there. So it's stuff that I'm going to be doing. And, you know, then inside, I have all the paperwork on the bike. I have the climber's manual in here. I took it page by page, a bunch of pages at a time, and used the punch, you know, you have that 3-hole puncher, and I put it in a notebook because it lays flat. If you keep it as a book, it's nice, but you know how it is, you lay it and then the pages flip. This way it lays flat. It's just my preference. I have papers in here about, I can buy a Walmart oil filter, and the name of it, well, they have it for this bike, the PH 6018. I even put the price. The headlight bulb for this Suzuki Boulevard you can buy, and it's like a car. It's the same thing as a car headlight, that you just buy the bulb. I put an extra one in the saddlebag because you're always using your low beam mostly. When you drive during the day, you always have your low beam on. If it burns out and you're out at night, always you got your high beam. You're going to be blinding everybody. I stuck one in there. It's nothing. Take 2 screws out, pop it out, put the new one in, go. The final drive, you want to change your oil in it. It's probably shaft driven. Change that oil. Put your mileage in your book, everything you've done to it, and keep a record. Now you can just open it and look, how many miles till I change oil. The guys that own these, the guy that owned this one and his buddy had one, they loved these bikes. They would change oil every 2,000 miles. Well, I don't. I go by 3,000. It's even embossed right by the window. It says 3,000, you know, it has 3,000. They want you to change it every 3,000. So why would you do it every 2? You're just wasting, you know, I mean, if you use Mobil 1, it's expensive. So you don't need to. Go by the manufacturer. They know best. And the Harley, now that oil, I use Harley Davidson oil because it's formulated for that bike. I wouldn't use anything else. and it's I think it calls for a 70 weight, and I contacted Harley and asked them, they don't have it, I'd have to order it special. Can I use 60 weight? And they said yes, it would be all right for that bike, the 60 weight. So that's what I use, Harley Davidson. But for this one, Mobil 1. And having a new bike, and it depends a lot. Are you going to keep it, or are you going to keep it like a year and then move up? If you're going to keep that bike, like I'm going to keep this one, I would suggest, you know, well, even if you're going to keep it a year, is getting the Harbor Freight truing stand. Take the front wheel off first. It's easiest. Take it off, put it on the stand, and if you look on, I think I have it on a video about the V-Rod. I show how I use it. Bike shops aren't going to take that much time. You know, they want to get it done. They do it close. But when you do it like I did it, and I take my time and let that wheel settle down and, you know, move my weights back and forth, and like I said, put, if you need it, an ounce, you'd have, they come in quarter and I think half-ounce weights that you can buy at Harbor Freight for balancing these. If you're going to use an ounce, that would be 2 on this side and 2 on this side. Don't put 4 on all one side, because like I said, it'll balance it lateral. So you go by that. You can look at my video. Balance both wheels, because you take it out, and if you've taken your time and you put that wheel any place, you turn it and leave it, turn it and leave it, and it stays there like I show, that thing is so much smoother. I mean, believe me, that is well worth the time and effort. And the balancer don't cost that much. And every time you put wheels on, tires, and if I was to, I put my own tires on, I mail order them, but like if you're like, you don't want to go through that, take it to the shop, tell them to put the tire on, but don't balance it. Make sure, you know, tell them, say, don't balance it. I want to balance it once you have your balancer, because you are going to take more time because it's your bike and you're going to be riding it. So you spend an extra, not even half hour on it, but you know it's done perfect, and you'll notice the smoothness of the bike. I think that's about it. I've answered the questions the best I could. And it's just now I have to do, I noticed my clutch, it's got more, you know, you pull it in, this is a brake, but the clutch, you might have that much, it's not much play in there. Well, mine's a lot more. I can adjust it right there, and down below there's a cable right there, but I'm going to do the full adjustment. If you look at Two Wheel Obsession, Brian Glenn, he shows how to do the full clutch adjustment. You slacken everything, go down the bottom, and you have to take off a cover down there, and he'll show you there's a screw with a lock nut. You unlock that nut, and then you turn that screw out, then go in until it barely touches, and you'll do that a couple times to feel it. And once you have that down where it just touches, then you back it off a quarter turn, hold it, lock the nut down, then all the rest you adjust to get that little play where you want it. And that's a full adjustment. It's easy to do. So I'm going to be doing that on my bike, but there's no need to show it because he shows it. I know it works for any bike like that. All these have that kind of adjustment on it. So that's what you want to do, is adjust it like that. And that's about it. Yeah, the windshields, like I said, and there's one other thing about setting the headlight. I got this bike, took it out. Man, I know he didn't ride at night, hardly ever. The headlight is pointing down. That's a high beam. I mean, it's right down in front of me. I'm like, how the hell are you going to see at night like that? But I imagine they went out in dark once in a while. But my God, I couldn't see nothing. And I like a light up where, you know, we have deer around here. You can see their eyes. You know, a lot of times you'll see their eyes before them at night because they just shine. So let me get my Harley book. It's in there, and I'll talk about how to adjust the headlight. So the adjustment of the headlight, and this will also work for a car, because my wife's car, when we got it new, brought it home, and the low beams were too high. Everybody was flashing her, and we let it go. Oh, we'll adjust it. Would go for inspection. I thought I'll get them to adjust it. Kept forgetting, because you take it down in the daytime. So I one night used this formula for the motorcycle and set her car up out here, and it worked. Now this came from JP Cycles with their hints. It works great. Okay, you want it on a level surface, and you put the front axle right the middle of your front axle of your front wheel. You drop down, and then you measure. Well, take a measurement from a wall. You're going to need a wall, and what I do out here is I put a cement block with a 2x4 sticking up. Okay, so from the ground up, I put a mark 35 inches, and I put a line. You can have it on the side of the wall, you can put a piece of tape, anything. But so, from the ground up, and have the bike level over from it, but that line from the ground up would be 35 inches. Now, take your bike back, and from the middle of your front axle, straight down, you want to be 25 foot from that wall, or that where you have your mark, 25 foot back. This is with your highlights on, your high beam. Adjust your light so it's right on that mark. I have found I go a little higher on this bike and her car, but you can start with putting it right on the line or just above it. Lock it down, take it for a ride, and see how it is. Comes out perfect. And that was in that book. And it's so easy to do. And this is one of the books for the Harley with all the information, everything. This one, I have two books, because this has the regular Harley Davidson book. The other one has a climber, because sometimes a climber explains it a little better, or this one explains something you're doing a little better. So I go back and forth on them, and it's worked. But I have the original paperwork from when I bought it, everything. So that's how to set your headlight. It works, and it'll work for a car too, because I put my block right here. I have a little ramp going out here. I put that cement block there, put a board up. Then out on the road, I actually have paint on the road. I sprayed a place real good, and I have a line on it. When I put that there, I double check, and it's 25 foot back and 35 inches high. Set the high beam, and like I said, I go just a little higher, because on this bike I had to bring it back, adjust it a little higher, and I believe on her car it needed a little higher. But hers was, oh man, her high beams are shining up. You can see the trees. And you know, they were both off on her car, so they messed up somehow there, but no big deal. And good riding weather's coming. This week's going to be nice. I think we only have one day with a little partial rain, and then I got so much to do in here. I've been trying to clean this shop up, and every time I go to do something, something comes up. It's like, you know, I'm helping people. Neighbors up here took a big tree down, big pine tree. The roots don't grow very deep. They're just right under the surface. So he took all the bottom limbs off. He dug a trench around to reveal them roots. Then he hooked his truck up on that tree, and I mean, it's a tall tree. And what he did was he cut all them roots, cut a section out the whole way around. Then he pulled it with his truck. It pulled it right down. So the wife and I were up there just to watch, you know, to make sure nothing happens, this and that. But boy, he took off, pulled that tree right down. So they were cutting the limbs, this and that, and he was taking it way up there to a burn pile. And then, you know, he was cutting them up first so we could pull them. I said, well, why don't you cut it in big sections, hook it with the truck, drag them up there? So we started doing that, because it's right by the burn pile. Nobody thought of it. You know, we're carrying and carrying. I'm saying, man, you know, we could do this so much faster. So we helped them with that and had fun. But hang in there, right?